This is part 6 of the Basis 137 with Bob Osborne, and he's talking about communes in other parts of the world.
When D.H. Lawrence was expelled from Cornwall in 1917, the two main reasons were that the sexual activities that he got up, which kind of more or less shocked the local community. And but the main reason was that Frieda von Richthofen, his wife, and Lawrence, the authorities suspected that they were spying for the Germans because there was a lot of activity with U-boats being sunk off the Zennor coast, and it might just have been a coincidence, but they were under a lot of suspicion. And I think these two completely bohemian characters, with an entourage of occultists and magicians and elitists, and were certainly an alarming thing, and they were spied on constantly. And when they were expelled from 1917, a lot of people thought, well, that's the end of it, we've got rid of them. But clearly, the commune network had been established because the Zennor commune was really a template for a lot of future communes. There was another commune in a village called Nancledra, which is just across the moors from where I am at Tregurthan, and this was established during the Second World War, and it was actually funded by John Middleton Murray, one of the protagonists in Lawrence's commune. He was part of the Peace Pledge Union, and this commune was for pacifists and people of probably left-wing persuasion. So there was anarchists there, and that was also busted during the Second World War because they painted all the doors blue, and the local authorities, the local police force, were in a complete state of paranoia, as they were during the First World War. Cornish always been suspicious of outsiders and the threat of German invasion. So these doors that were all painted blue were all investigated people, and they thought they were signals to German parachutists. In fact, the reality is they'd found a load of blue paint on the road that had been dumped, and because it was a commune and they had no money, they used that paint. But one of the people in this commune was a guy called Gerald Vaughan, and a couple of years prior to that, he was involved with a very suspicious activity taking place on, I've previously referred to, the haunted cottage up on Zennor Moors, which is called the Carn. In 1938, there's a house above me called Eagle's Nest. Ironically, that's the same name as Hitler's summer residence in Berchtesgaden. Now, the Eagle's Nest has always been owned by rich Fabians, and the Fabian that was living there, post Virginia Woolf staying and writing a lot of her famous novels there, was a guy called William Arnold Forster. William Arnold Forster was very instrumental in the Fabian Society. His wife, Catherine Arnold Forster, was a secretary for the Fabian Society, and William Arnold Forster was also a cousin of the Huxleys. So you can see how this network of related families, were in these positions where, Tregurthan being a very out-of-the-way place, along with other venues like Lord Treliger's Castle in Wales, where, Rudolf Hess and German rent boys would come over. There was a lot of things going on there that they thought, weren't in the public eye. So this house, Eagle's Nest, it was William Arnold Forster who actually set up the League of Nations, which then became the United Nations, and also he'd set up Gordonstone School, and Gordonstone School was run along the same principles as a school in Germany called Salem School, which was run along German military lines, in the sense that it was to do with outdoor activity, with making the population tough and resilient, and also indoctrinate them with various let's say empirical belief systems that were very much part of a New Order way of thinking. So Gordonstone School was set up in the house just up on the hill from me. During the war, Haile Selassie was in exile there from Ethiopia. Now, this has also caused a lot of local interest. I mean, what's Haile Selassie doing in Zennor, in this remote house? Well, after the Italians invaded Abyssinia, I think it was, and Haile Selassie was also a high-level Freemason, as was William Arnold Forster. In fact, the whole Fabian network is run on Freemasonry principles. Ribbentrop was also hanging around in 1938. I've written all about that in the book too, explain what he's doing there. But Gordonstone School was quite interesting because he set this up with a guy called Kurt Hahn, who was actually expelled from Germany when the Nazis, when Hitler came to power. And Kurt Hahn then collaborated with William Arnold Forster, who was a high-up Fabian, to create Gordonstone School. There's also a connection going forward, which I'm going to be talking about, the connections between the occult and the counterculture society, counterculture movement. In that, one of the people that sent his son to Gordonstone, which surprised me, was David Bowie, who also had a connection with Zennor and St Ives, and as I previously mentioned, was very much a Crowleyite and very interested in magic, in interdimensional travel, in alien technology, and so he sent his son to Gordonstone School, and of course, Prince Philip was, Prince Charles was there, and von Battenberg was instrumental in running the school on military lines. And it was his wife, Catherine Arnold Forster, who was also involved with the world of Virginia Woolf. Rupert Brooke was her lover, the great First World War poet. She was involved with George Mallory. She was involved with the crowd that Robert Graves was a very much part of, head off, in the Oxford set of intellectuals. In 1938, she was summoned to this cottage because the people living there found a young couple called the Vaughans, believed that there was black magic rituals taking place there. And Aleister Crowley was behind this, and I've also spoken about the covens or the communes that Crowley controlled and manipulated in the area, as well as other places. On this occasion, she was summoned. She had tried to get Crowley thrown out of Cornwall, and apparently he had holy water thrown in his face by the vicar of Zennor. Crowley was managed to annoy everybody, and she went up there to supposedly rescue these people from whatever was poltergeist activity was taking place, or shape-shifting activity. And then she immediately had a heart attack, and that whole suspicious death of her on that night was actually covered up, and all the previous researchers have tried to find out about that, and of course the information has been redacted. And so Colonel Prothero, the chief inspector, clearly again a Mason, the Masons and the Fabians, managed to keep quiet about things they don't want coming out. So this whole mystery was another part of this commune activity that was ongoing, that the locals certainly didn't want to be discussed. And in fact, that I've even brought this up as I antagonised my neighbours in Eagle's Nest, because the house was passed on to other Fabian artists, some of whom were very important in the St Ives community. So this sense that Tregurthan wasn't the only commune really fascinated me, and then I started investigating into why they really came to Zennor. So this relates to I've gone back, sorry. I want to go. Arrow. Oh yeah. This relates to D.H. Lawrence's wife, Frieda von Richthofen. Now, this is an area that I found so interesting that I could have just written a whole book about this, really. But this is Frieda in the middle, and on the left is Elsa von Richthofen, and on the right is Nusch von Richthofen. These are the three daughters of a German military minor aristocracy called Baron Richthofen. They were. She was educated by nuns in Bavaria, in the Black Forest. So she was at that time, around the time of 1900, very much part of this new European avant-garde movement that was linked to various agendas like feminism, free love, bohemian intellectualism. So really a very important character that is often neglected because of the literary world's obsession with D.H. Lawrence. But Frieda, to a certain extent, where she had got possibly indoctrinated or had picked up a lot of her ideologies and ideas, was a commune called Mont Verita, which was just on Switzerland, on the Italian border, in an area called Ascona. Now, when I started looking into this commune, I unearthed so much information, it actually blew my mind. This is in an area that is a bit similar to Zennor, really, in the sense that it's an area where that was always attracted geomancers. There's a lot of ley line activity there. It had always been a den of occultists, anarchists, outlaws, fugitives. In the 1870s, it was used as a hiding place for anarchists from Russia, for artists who wanted to escape civilization. So it's one of those little enclaves in Switzerland that ultimately was transferred into what you could almost say is like a Davos-like community now, where they're establishing programs that they're going to project out into the world, and these elites, these intellectuals, were establishing communes that then could spread to other parts of the world. So this was really the first major, commune that was set up in order to bring about and discuss the agendas that they wanted to promote. So Frida, who was a very willful, free-spirited young girl, and her two sisters. This is a very complicated romantic web, but Frida, her dad, believed that her concept of free love was, which was an early feminist, she was very much into female empowerment, was a reaction to her father, who was controlling, and her father represented the German patriarchy. So she completely went off on the other direction. And before she met Lawrence, when she met Lawrence, she was married to a guy called Ernest Weekly, who was a professor in Nottingham, and she had 3 children with Ernest Weekly, and Aldous Huxley, who later developed a keen interest in both D.H. Lawrence and Frida, described him as possibly the dullest professor in the Western world. So when Frida met Lawrence, according to her biographer, Brenda Maddox, within 20 minutes she was in bed with him. So she clearly was attracted to unstable geniuses, because her whole history in the commune at Montverde is that her first relationship with a guy called a Swiss painter, an anarchist. He was on the run for setting fire to a police station, bombing a police station. Then she went and developed relationships with a guy called Otto Gross, who I'm going to come on to in a minute. But her sister, Elsa, was even more dramatic in her love life, because she was married to a guy called Edgar Jaff, who was the German foreign minister, and she had a child with him called Peter. She also had a relationship with a guy called Otto Gross, who subsequently her sister Frida had a relationship with. Otto Gross I'm going to talk about. She had a child with Otto Gross, also called Peter. And then she also had a relationship with 2 guys called Max and Alfred Weber, who were German economists, really the deep economic think tank behind the reviving German economy at that time. And it was them that were instrumental in following the agendas, or setting up the agendas that led to the Frankfurt School, which is a very dominant ideological thing that led to cultural Marxism in the during the 20th century. So Frida and Elsa were both hanging out at this commune around 1907, and then they got involved with this man on the left. This is Otto Gross, and the other man in this picture is Carl Jung. Well, these are 2 highly influential psychotherapists or philosophers, and they were kind of based at the commune at Montverde. The commune at Montverde became a breeding ground for a lot of dissident artists that from all over the world that were being displaced. So they were looking for a Shangri-La, just as Lawrence was looking for a Shangri-La, or what you call a modern utopia, which is how he came to turn up at Zennor. And a lot of these people tapped into the energies that were in the surrounding areas, because again it had a mystical quality. And so this idea was developed by a Belgian pianist and a German artist who decided to set up a sanatorium there when they were on a heliopath cure, which is a sun doctor cure. So it's based on the fact that Switzerland has always been kind of one big sanatorium, as well as being the banking centre. It's also a hotbed of alternative lifestyle, based on health and alternative medicines. Given the clean air. So Otto Gross was really another major important player in the psychiatric counterculture revolution. He was the son of a criminologist. He was an extremely unstable and brilliant man, and he had the gift of mesmerism. So he was also a complete sex addict and a drug addict. So he turned up. He was the resident psychiatrist at Montveritas, and he developed what is called anti-psychiatry. So he had the ability to mesmerise people, and he was early on practicing hypnotism, and he would hypnotise normally beautiful women from aristocratic backgrounds on the basis that he would release their inner demons and release the inner. His sense of orgiastic potency was a bit similar to Wilhelm Reich's, and it was a prevailing notion at the time that Lawrence also ran with, in the sense that you need to release, the sexual energy that is suppressed by modern civilization and bourgeois society. So this was a complete free-for-all, this commune, in extremis, and he was hypnotising women, and then of course he was having sex with them, and he also was one of the pioneers of assisted suicide, which relates now. We've got Dignitas in Switzerland, so he helped to do assisted suicide for two of his mistresses, and this caused a bit of a scandal. But because they were in this commune in the middle of nowhere, you could get away with things like this. So he also organised orgies in barns. He was having an affair with Frieda von Richthofen. She was having an affair with her sister Elsa. He was also involved with a lot of these economists at the time who were establishing the framework for the way that the New World Order would be brought in, and economies would be run, and countries would be infiltrated with belief systems. And this was really about taking over countries using cultural belief systems, rather than the actual political takeover. So it's a kind of insidious way of using artists, using great thinkers in order to promote the agendas that you want to promote. So Otto Gross, it all went badly for him. He was eventually arrested for his activities, and he went on the run, and he hid in an asylum, and then eventually he was put into a mental asylum for being a paranoid schizophrenic by his father, who was a bastion of polite society. So immediately you get this split between the old Victorian age with all its conventions and its more or less orthodox belief systems, and of course this new radical agenda which was really coming to fruition around this time between 1900 and 1914, when we're entering the new 20th century. Then you've got all the coming new age, the Eon of Horus, then subsequently the age of Aquarius. So Otto Gross had a huge influence on Frieda von Richthofen. I don't know that he programmed Frieda von Richthofen, but certainly he transferred a lot of his belief systems in free love, in chaos, in living completely without restraint. This all sounds great. We've all kind of lived this life to a certain extent. Anyone who's grown up in 20th century, hippie movements or counterculture movements, we've all, this is a kind of another utopian ideal, but inevitably it kind of goes wrong, because then that agenda is moved into another agenda. So Otto Gross had an influence on Frieda von Richthofen, and she clearly passed a lot of these doctrines on to D.H. Lawrence, because when she eloped with D.H. Lawrence, she left her 3 children with her husband, who was Lawrence's tutor. So she recognised Lawrence's genius, and then they went on a walking tour and they became inseparable. And 5 or 6 years later, they set up the commune at Zennor, having looked for places to establish similar communes, and spread similar doctrines. So Otto Gross was also massively influential, because he was clearly a very brilliant visionary, and he was almost like an early rock star. He was the rock star of psychiatry. And Freud, both Freud and Jung, Ernst Jung was also at the Ernst Jung became the darling of Western philosophy, and of course his ideas about the collective unconscious archetypes. A lot of his inspiration was drawn from the fact that we have a collective unconscious, and these things must be summoned. So the id rather than the ego became the thing to release. And of course, a lot of this was related to Eastern mysticism and the use of at that time the hallucinogenic drugs were widely used, and Gross was constantly, he was a cocaine addict, and they were also taking all forms of mescaline, and they were also involved with Crowley sex magic rituals, and they were exploring all these religions. Jung then went on to more or less develop and promote Otto Gross's theories of anti-psychiatry into the Western world, and of course Jung was then lauded and praised and became a very important figure. The other guy that was influenced by Otto Gross was Sigmund Freud. Now, Sigmund Freud was very much part of the Fabian mindset, let's put it that way. Sigmund Freud had a very dodgy activities involving his own theories about sexual repression, and that females are really, it's penis envy and the whole thing. He was a kind of quite a dark character, and of course there was rumours about him child abuse, molesting his daughter Anna Freud, and and of course later his nephew, was it Clement Freud, was partly involved with the Madeleine McCann. It turns out there was kind of links there, which I'm not going to go into here. So the Freud wanted Otto Gross to take on or develop the Freudian path of psychiatry, but unfortunately Otto Gross was such an indisciplined and uncontrollable genius that they decided that he was just beyond it, and of course he went down the route and then was confined to a mental asylum and died at the early age of 43. But another psychiatrist that was influenced by Otto Gross was a guy called I've forgotten his name now, Ernest Jones. He became D.H. Lawrence's psychiatrist, and it was Ernest Jones that got Lawrence out of fighting in the First World War, because he deemed that Lawrence to be, he used influence so that Lawrence would wouldn't have to go and fight, and was sent to Tregurthan to work on the farm and do what's called assisted work. The other two guys that were also at Tregurthan were Middleton Murray, who was pardoned from fighting in the First World War, and he got a job working for British intelligence, doing propaganda. Peter Warlock, Philip Hasseltine, the occultist that was also part of the commune at Zennor, he got pardoned on the basis that primarily he was very rich, but his Harley Street doctor said that he had a medical condition that he couldn't urinate in public, so therefore he was freed from fighting in the First World War. So all these people, were in this commune at Zennor. They were all, free from going to the war, and of course this caused a lot of problems with the local farmers who'd also gone to the war, and they were sent these people to supposedly help them on the farm, and of course they weren't able to do any farm work. They were all engaged in sexual activities with locals and performing their various rites. So you can see how these communes, one commune can be like a time bomb that can actually draw a lot of people in. A lot of young people can be drawn in. So Frieda von Richthofen really channeled a lot of these theories and brought them to Zennor. So how Lawrence got involved with he had his own belief systems that were based on a zoologist called Ernst Haeckel, and this was to do with monism and duality, and this is a very complicated subject, but basically what it comes down to is a belief in pantheism, in that you need to separate the separation between mind and matter, which is duality, needs to be synthesized. So monism is when you worship, effectively Pan, which is Pan is Greek for all. So Pan became more or less the god of choice, or the deity of choice, for a lot of these atheists, revolutionaries, artists to tap into, and of course Pan is the earth energies. So then Pan also can be connected to Baphomet and Lucifer, but that's another whole complicated story. But Lawrence was aware of all these methods of tapping into ancient powers and ancient wisdom. So the commune at Montverratat really spread very quickly. A lot of people who were dissidents, who were fleeing from various military chaos that were probably organised, were joining this commune, and this became a centre for like some of the most brilliant minds of the 20th century were joining this commune, and within a very short time, the whole health thing, the health program started to be promoted, and there's a guy called Raphael Friedeberg who was in the he promoted natural remedies, and one of the big centres of activity that developed at Mont Verita was called this kind of technique of unconscious dancing, and I think you've got there's a picture of, I've got lots of pictures in the book of nudity was promoted. The ethos was very much what the Nazis later developed it, in the sense that you had to learn, through physical discipline, through fasting, through diet, through outdoor exercise, through taking sun cures. This is all very idealistic, and it's how we all want to live. But at the same time, it was part of a bigger program. So there was a dance school set up by this guy, and two of the most famous dancers at this school were a woman called Mary Wigman, who became something of called celebrity, back in New York when she moved on from Ascona. She had a dance school there, and her dancing was to do with invocation. It was all to do with worshipping Pan and summoning, bringing in demons that you could translate physically through your movements. Incredible for sure. And she was also then went on to promote what's called a modern unconsciousness dancing. And another famous one of these dancing people was Isadora Duncan, who was also connected to Lawrence's world, and also a big influence on Frieda von Richthofen. In fact, in Lawrence's novel Women in Love, Isadora Duncan is portrayed under a different name. Isadora Duncan also attracted the attention of Aleister Crowley, who was very interested in her dancing techniques, and he actually wrote about her under the name of Lavinia King in his novel Moonchild. The Moonchild was about summoning entities and expressing yourself through sexual magic, and also to do with the split between what's called the Black Brotherhood and the White Brotherhood, and this was basically the split between various occult groups, and almost like on a checkerboard. So also there's lots of interest among these people and among the Fabian network into what's called zombie dancing, and certainly the Nazis were experimenting, were very interested in voodoo in Haiti, and the concept that these two very famous dancers who went on to more or less create the whole concept of modern dance movement. It was to do with a lot of this thing that you're channeling things up from the earth. You can see, you're bringing stuff up from the earth, and then you're looking into a more celestial state where your body becomes a zombie, and you're devoting yourself to Pan, and it's almost like you're channeling this physical energy, which they're in extreme in a kind of utopian physical environment where they can be naked, they can have as much sex as they want, they're getting the best food, and they're undergoing a lot of meditation techniques and yoga. This is where a lot of these agendas were really set in place. So the Nazis were interested in zombie dancing, and of course after the war, people like who we've referred to in previous chats about, like people like Dr. Ewan Cameron, the whole after the Second World War, they were also very interested in. He was particularly interested in some of the African rituals where entities can be summoned, and the whole voodoo thing, and certainly this was something they went into with regard to their mind control techniques. So dancing was one of the many things there. The other thing that they developed was sun worship, which appeals to me because I've spent a lot of my time worshipping the sun in various Greek islands, and I know the benefits of getting the sun on your pineal gland, which is the V in your forehead. You can go into a trance-like state, if you can tune into the sun, and certainly Lawrence also had an obsession with the sun, and this was established these are called Lufthutten, and the theory was that all these people, these young, rich, physical specimens with enormous intellectual and spiritual powers, would literally worship the sun, and this again is to do with pantheism and worship of Pan. So the children of the sun, effectively, it becomes the children of Lucifer. So they were involved in the benefits of sun worship, which we all know. And of course now when you get problems with people with vitamin D and they're told to put sun cream on and not go in the sun for more than 20 minutes, again, you're depriving people of the very best thing that nature can give you. So, again, it gets perverted. But this obsession with the body, with health, also it's a very Germanic obsession. It goes back to Teuton times, and the concept then 20, 30 years later of the Superman, the Nazis' concept of the Superman, which also, places like Gordonstoun School, there was kind of a fixation on making children healthy, like cold water swimming, which is all great. But a lot of these agendas, vegetarianism, sun worship, and the sun worship thing really became a big thing because then it was taken to the likes of California. And some of the people that were influenced by their time there were, Huxley, Hermann Hesse, all the great names. I mean, Franz Kafka. Apart from the people that wanted to promote a worship of nature agenda, or what subsequently got perverted into the green agenda, which then got perverted into the climate change and the zero carbon agenda. So you can see how these ostensibly very attractive utopian ideals are then perverted and used for an agenda down the road that is not in the interest of the people that have signed up or been programmed into these initial belief systems. The children of the sun was a thing that really did take off in California, later on, and it was the Sonnenkinder they were called, and people like Christopher Isherwood, who was involved with Crowley in Berlin, wrote a fantastic book, Goodbye to Berlin. It was very much it became part of the Nazi ethos as well. So the concept that these people were like, the Nazi ethos took it further because they used it to create what they called their warrior mentality, like the super soldiers, So a lot of these people who were in these communes were from very privileged families, but they had the ability, or they had the wherewithal and the influence to spread doctrines that then could be used by other entities or political establishments or think tanks or controlling organisations to change those again. So Christopher Isherwood went to California and became influenced in Los Angeles with the health food movement, the free sex, we can go on to all Timothy Leary and all that stuff. So related to this, another guy, very interesting man, who I've studied his work, called Arnold Ehret. Now, he really is the pioneer of what we now call the detoxification movement. So Arnold Ehret was this brilliant, I think he was Austrian, completely non-establishment narrative. He came up with really a lot of original research, and they thought he was actually nuts at the time. But he had a practice or a facility at Ascona as well, at Mont Verita. And he was really one of the ones that promoted the whole concept of the vegan diet, vegetarianism. Also, he advocated, the raw food diet, which I've actually, followed myself on many occasions in order to reset your mechanism. And he also advocated fasting, which, that's going to be a thing that's going to get a lot of publicity now because, I do intermittent fasting myself, and I practice various diets like the carnivore diet and the vegan diet. And I think the benefits of fasting are no doubt, it's an ancient wisdom, but what they're going to do now, they're going to get people to fast simply because, they're going to take away all the, so it's going to be perverted as usual in the sense that you don't need to be eating so much. But Arnold Ehret then went to New York, and his ideas really spread rapidly, and he became a bit of a guru for the California and the surfing community. So his book on rational fasting really became a bit of a Bible. And then, of course, the establishment, I think, took over his ideas, and he unfortunately fell over and hit his head on a pavement, and supposedly and died. At a stage when he was in the middle of a lot of research, and he was getting quite a foothold in with his lectures and things like that. So his research was obviously taken over by other interested parties, but again, it was at Mont Verita where a lot of this, a lot of these doctrines or ideals, were programmed or put together and constructed. You can see the kind of people that were at this commune in like, this is, I think, 1911, 1912. I mean, these are people. This could be any, freshers party any time during the 20th century. I mean, this is the hippie ideal. There's cross-dressing. There's nudity. There's drug taking. They're living in a beautiful environment. So this was really one of the places where a lot of these elites and a lot of these brilliant people all got involved and enjoyed their time there. And again, this is a bit of a jokey one, but yeah, this is again 1911. This guy's digging the commune. So what they would do, they would, apart from the brilliant people who would go there, who would be like sponsored in a way to promote these agendas, they would attract a lot of penniless vagabonds and people like that, or general nutcases, and they get them to do all the work. So this guy's like digging away there, and so there was already a kind of almost like a class system going on there. So I mean, this picture, it kind of could be any time really. It could be later than this. It could be, to me, it could be 1960s Southern California. It could be Germany. I mean, I've lived in communes in Germany where this is how you live. You in the 70s, you looked like Jesus. You had your hair, you had nudity, and you were outdoors. And this is why the 60s just didn't happen. It just didn't appear as a kind of revolt against the 50s. It's a program that was long established and long arranged. Again, we go back to Aleister Crowley. When I found out about this commune, that was all enough, really. I mean, that was incredible idea about how it led to the Zennor program, because part of the documentation which I've looked at, it said that the Mont Verita is the template for programs that need to, or communes that need to be spread throughout the world. So they didn't just come to Zennor, they then went to lots of other places as well. And over the course of the century, you can see that this idea, this lifestyle, it's a lifestyle choice that the rich and the elites made. And it became very much like, it wasn't everyone who could live on communes. It really was another elitist agenda. And in 1910, what I found out about Crowley's involvement with this was, again, there's no end to the intrigue that goes on. One of the agents or important people at Mont Verita, apart from the health movement and the artistic movement, we're talking about like the cream of European intellectuals at that time. Hermann Hesse, I've mentioned, lots of very fine painters, lots of Dadaists that went on to create the Berlin Dada movement, which was the anti-art movement. Musicians, like people like Stravinsky, who wrote Rites of Spring. There was the political anarchists. Lenin was there, Trotsky was there, and of course Trotsky was also at LSE. So you can see the kind of link-ups between LSE, which is an arm of British intelligence, and a big promoter of Fabian doctrines. And it was LSE during the First World War where effectively the Gay Liberation Front was formed, although that was only legitimised in the 60s. But the plans were put in place at LSE, and a lot of people that came to LSE, like George Soros later on was at LSE. I think Trotsky was at LSE. I think Karl Marx was involved with LSE. LSE, apart from these other doctrines, had during the First World War what's called the PIE, which actually was the paedophile information exchange. So, as well as all this free love and all this like cross-dressing, you can see how it's used as a cover for other agendas, and the PIE slowly was infiltrated into society with transgenderism. And so you can like suddenly make it's no longer offensive to people's morality if you can get into their heads the fact that there aren't two distinct sexes, and that sometimes people have psychiatric disorders, or they don't know what gender they are, and therefore it becomes almost acceptable that children has to be sexualized. And a lot of the sexualization of children was due to people like Sigmund Freud, and to a less extent I think Carl Jung was more of a pure genius who looked at archetypes but drawing on occult symbolism. So in 1910, there was a guy called Theodor Reuss who ran the Bavarian. He was a member of the Bavarian Illuminati, and he also was the controlling the Bavarian Freemasonry lodge that he formed, called the Ordo Templis Orientis, and this German secret society was based on the Bavarian Illuminati belief systems that again hark back to a lot of Eastern mysticism and Knights Templars ideologies and Baphomet worship, and also Pan worship. We talk about oneness rather than and synthesizing people into one. The global dream. The New World Order dream. So he was running the OTO at Mont Verita. Indoctrinating a lot of people into the Bavarian occult system, and at that time he recruited Aleister Crowley he tried to recruit him into the Bavarian Illuminati Freemasonry setup, because Crowley was, as I explained, was a master of infiltration. And prior to that, in 1898, Crowley had infiltrated the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which was an English version of their own version of esoteric practices, which was connected to Freemasonry and the summoning of entities, astral projection, vampirism, necromancy. Once you go up to be initiated into these organizations, you go into some very dark practices. So Crowley had infiltrated the Hermetic Order, simply because his unbelievable knowledge of Enochian magic. Clearly he went in straight away at a very high level, and he was actually expelled from the Order of the Golden Dawn, which was also linked to Jacobism. And funny enough, there's another massive link to Zennor, which I won't go into on this occasion, to do with the Jacobites who wanted to overthrow governments, and the Jacobites were linked to the Cornish revivalist movement, so they infiltrated the Cornish revivalist movement. Crowley was at Cambridge, was also obsessed with Celtic things, as a lot of Victorian mystics were and poets were. The Celtic, that sense of King Arthurian legend, which is very big and very major part of Cornwall, and of course that's also another reason why the Nazis are very interested in Western Cornwall, because the whole place is seeped in this this magic, this witchcraft, this Arthurian legend. So Crowley had infiltrated the Golden Dawn. He'd got rid of W.B. Yeats, and the Golden Dawn at that time was controlled by the Fabian elites, of which Yeats was a bit of a poster boy. So how he managed to infiltrate these societies, it's incredible, really. So he'd infiltrate the Golden Dawn, and then Reuss tried to use Crowley as an agent for the Bavarian Illuminati to then go and infiltrate the English Freemasonry, which was, they were slightly at odds with each other. And again, we've got a Hegelian dialectic, because Hegelian dialectic, if anyone doesn't know what it is, it's from a philosopher called Hegel, where you set up two opposing a thesis and an antithesis, and these apparent two contrasting arguments, ultimately lead one to the same destination. So it's about the synthesis of the dialectic, and the dialectics are put in place by higher powers or higher intelligences or controllers of the universe, whoever they might be. Ultimately, whichever choice you take leads you to the same destination. So things like the Matrix, you get the red pill, the blue pill. Again, it's all a Hegelian dialectic, and the whole thing about whether the DVD infiltrate British secret societies. Again, it's a Hegelian dialectic, because both the Bavarian Illuminati and the English Freemasonry secret societies all ultimately lead to the New World Order, which is the end game. So it doesn't really matter how you get there. So Crowley was being used by, he was much in demand, so they both wanted Crowley in their organisations. So whether he was a double agent, playing them off against each other, he was probably just so into his own form of magic, which he wanted to replace traditional religion. So he wanted Thelema to become the new religion. It's gone off there, Miles, on the screen. It's gone black. Something came up saying 42 seconds left.
Oh God.
We can break if you want.
No. Yeah. Well, we could. Yeah, we could break.
If you need to do something.
No, we don't need to break.
I'm kind of motoring through now, so I'm getting to the kind of end.
Getting to the exciting.
Without, I mean, how I'm trying to condense this into.
You're doing fine.
Yeah, it's okay. It's challenging, but
you want to do another half hour?
Yeah, I'm happy to go now. I'm in it. I'm in it now. So it's about another half hour. Yeah.
Yeah, let's go. Okay.
You can cut that bit, can't you?
Yeah. Go.
So Crowley, at that time, was ostensibly working for both the Bavarian OTO, which is derived from Bavarian Freemasonry and run by the Illuminati. He was also working, or was expelled from the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. So the English establishment never really trusted Crowley, and partly the reason that what happened in 1938 is that he apparently was undermining the Fabians, and he had come to the conclusion or realised that the Fabians were in bed with the Nazis. So the fact that von Ribbentrop was there and this guy called William Arnold Forster. Now, often the way to tell these stories is by what we call a Roman clef. So this story that I'll say briefly about what happened in Zennor to bring it back to base all the time is that Arnold Forster had an office in Switzerland and was working for the League of Nations, and of course the League of Nations and the United Nations pretty much had a similar agenda to what the Nazis had, because the bankers, Western bankers, funded Hitler. So whether Germany or Britain won the war, to a certain extent, it didn't really matter from their point of view, because both paths lead to the New World Order. And in the meantime, you've managed to depopulate quite a lot of slaves. So again, Crowley, I suspect, realised that. I think Crowley was a genuine eccentric Englishman who realised that the Fabians were actually traitors, and that the Fabians were in bed with the Hun. So I think that's one of the reasons they hated Crowley, because they never knew who he was working for, and ultimately he was he had such a massive ego, and he was such a narcissist that I think ultimately he was working for himself. So his idea was that all these religions should be replaced by his own religion, which called Thelema. So Thelema was the religion that he created in 1904 when he summoned up an entity called Iwas, and then of course that relates to Lamb, and Lamb is the vision that he painted of Lamb all the time conforms to the Greys. So when he summoned up these demons, he was told by this channeling, by these interdimensional beings, that he was to be the leader or the creator of the new era, the Eon of Horus. So Crowley was very much a really important figure in the New World Order, in the sense that his job was to promote the New World Order, and it didn't matter whether he was being a traitor to the Germans or to the English establishment, because I think he despised both. But his job was to bring in this new world. So he was at the top of this theoretical control society. So no doubt he was, whatever you call it, the Illuminati, but he was almost like a poster boy for them. So Theodore Royce tried to get him to for the Bavarian Illuminati to move into take control of the English Freemasonry Society. This is why you get this argument that the DVD infiltrated, or the Abwehr infiltrated British intelligence. So ultimately, it's a bit like a chess game where both players are controlled by someone else, who's determining all the moves, and ultimately, whichever side wins, the result is the same. And that's also to do with Project Looking Glass. So yeah, I mean, I could go on and on and on about Crowley, but his belief system was linked to the New Age, Age of Aquarius system, and of course, the whole Aquarius New Age thing was a Luciferian agenda that was spread through political means, through literary and artistic means, through the health food movement, which became a very important part of 20th century culture, because by programming the youths into almost this Nazi concept, which was very similar to what we were doing at Gordonstone. So the English public schools were run on quite similar lines to German public schools. So the English aristocracy and the German ruling class were pretty much all intermarried anyway. A lot of their theological belief systems came from the same philosophers and the same sources. So that's that went on and on and on, and then Crowley moved up through the ranks, and he spread. How this developed was that his influence then went to California, and in a minute I'll talk about how he influenced the real counterculture movement with regards to Timothy Leary and what went on in California with the communes, and that's an endless topic. So moving on from the Montverita commune, which became the template for the Zennor commune, and then that became a template for a lot of other communes that spread through England, and they were called Bruderhof communes, so they're based on the German principles, but a lot of these communes were adopted, and then I will say something about Wicca and stuff like this, and how they were adopted by the ruling classes. Just briefly, another major philosophical thinker in this game is a woman called Helena Blavatsky. Now, a lot of people who were at Ascona, Montverita, and also at the commune in Zennor, a lot of these great thinkers were heavily influenced by Madame Helena Blavatsky, including D.H. Lawrence, including Aleister Crowley. All the Fabians were very influenced by Blavatsky. She was a very wealthy woman, and her premise was that she accessed ascendant masters, and so she could access alien intelligence or through various channels. And she travelled around the world studying religions and theosophy, and she wrote The Secret Doctrine, which became a bit of a bible for for a lot of these great 20th century thinkers. And I won't go into her now. I think it merits a separate chat. But her and other people like Annie Besant and Alice Bailey, who those three women were really instrumental in setting up the Lucis Trust, which changed its name from Lucis Publishing. They were publishing all their theosophical doctrines, all their things about how society should be run in the 20th century, how we need to move into interdimensional dimensions, use the chakras, use all this mysticism. So it was those three people that really formed the basis of what became the League of Nations and the United Nations. So the United Nations, as I've said before, it is run on a completely Luciferian belief system, and that's a very complicated scenario, and we can do that another time. So she was hugely important. Now, how this spread, again, I don't know where to start, but what happened was that in Britain, a lot of these philosophies were adopted and spread by the Fabians. So moving forward after the Second World War, a lot of communes were being set up, and there was communes being set up in the New Forest, of which I've got some personal knowledge, all around the south in Cornwall, and they were normally set up by Fabians who were also, or Freemasons, also occultists. So the links between Wicca, which is a branch of occultism that was developed by a guy called Gerald Gardner, who was very much influenced by Aleister Crowley. And Wicker is the next village to me, as I explained before, where the chapel is, and where Lawrence was tapping into the energies that were coming out from the hieroglyph under the earth. In the New Forest, this became a breeding ground for communes, and one of the communes that I got particularly interested was set up there was called. It was run by the Association of Woodcutters, and it was a commune on a place called Brazier's Park. And this commune, I looked into the history of this commune just as much, and well, not as much as I looked into the history of the Zennor commune, but I found some incredible things. And this commune was in a 17th century house. Again, it's a little enclave of an area where the houses seem to be passed down through generations, and this was owned at one time by Valentine Fleming, whose son, of course, was Ian Fleming, who then went into MI5, and of course the whole James Bond thing, was just a cover story for based on his activities. And Ian Fleming, was also connected to the occult and also to Crowley. And Ian Fleming asked Crowley, when Rudolf Hess crash landed in Scotland, when he came over on mission Hess, he asked Crowley to debrief Hess. But then his overlords, military intelligence, decided that Crowley couldn't be trusted. So, this is the world of these people that are running these communes. And then at that time, this commune was passed on to the Association of Wood Guilds, which was a Freemasonic lodge.
I have to go back on that. Bloody phone's been ringing. Go back over that if you can.
Which bit?
We just the last bit on Crowley. On the commune. Oh, just.
Which bit was it? Was it New Forest?
Yes, New Forest. Start of New Forest, and you were involved with that.
Yes, one of the most interesting communes that I looked into was a commune in the New Forest. Was actually on a place called Brazier's Park, and this was another little enclave where houses seemed to get passed through generations, and that the 17th century house that was built there was owned around the time of the First World War by Valentine Fleming, who was Ian Fleming's mother. And of course Ian Fleming wrote the James Bond books, and Ian Fleming was also an occultist. She had an interesting flagellation with Aleister Crowley. Ian Fleming was also heavily involved with British military intelligence, and especially during the Second World War, when he was part of a group called Intrepid, who used psychic warfare and occultism to conduct their occult war with their counterparts, including Himmler. And Fleming tried to get Crowley because Crowley was moving in and out of these circles and working for various intelligence agencies. Fleming's idea was that Crowley should debrief Rudolf Hess when Rudolf Hess crash landed in the plot to get King Edward VIII on the throne. So, but Fleming's overlords decided that Crowley couldn't be trusted because they wasn't sure that he wasn't a double agent, so that didn't happen. But this house where Fleming had lived in had previously also been owned by A.A. Milne. Winnie the Pooh, of course, a British fascination, for children on bridges and things like that. So I'm not going to go into that area, but you can see that there's definite links between these Fabians and constantly there's a kind of interest in children. And this commune then spread into the 30s, and it became a venue where they decided that what they would do is educate and give a hand up to working class men. So they would get working class men, sometimes prisoners, kids on remand, to be the labourers in this commune. So you think that's all well and good, but clearly they like the idea of having all these strapping peasants, working class men, mingling with these aristocrats on this commune, and I dare say there was a lot of let's say sex practices going on, and the idea was that you could elevate the poor slaves. You select the ones that are healthy, that can do physical work, and then they work on this commune. So this Institute of Woodcutters, again, it was like a Freemasonic. So also you can indoctrinate or bring people, initiate the working class into these Freemasonry groups. So it was a breeding ground for dragging some of these healthy animals into their Freemasonry web. So this commune fascinated me, and then I found out that the guy that subsequently moved on to this commune and took charge of it before the Second or after the Second World War was a guy called Major Glyn Faithful, and I thought that rings a bell. Major Glyn Faithful was in MI6, quite high up in military intelligence, and he then had this commune, and he, after the Second World War, debriefed Himmler, because Himmler was also a massive occultist, and Himmler was really head of the German occult warfare group, and he had his own personal mystic in a guy called Karl Willigut, who was his version of Rasputin. So Himmler was involved with everything going, astrology, occultism, witchcraft, psychic battle, remote viewing, necromancy, ley line wars. So it was Major Faithful that was going to debrief Himmler, and the rumour is that Himmler had a suicide pill, but Faithful didn't know that he had this, and that Himmler had taken his suicide pill, and unfortunately he couldn't debrief him. But there's another counter argument there, that in the sense that he didn't commit suicide. He was brought into the network, to share his beliefs and then a new identity. So Major Robert Glyn Faithful turns out to be the father of Marianne Faithful. So, which is very interesting, because Marianne Faithful partly grew up in this commune. So when she was a beautiful young girl, and not only was this MI6 officer the father of Marianne Faithful, but her grandmother was Baroness von Massock, or the wife of Baron von Massock, who wrote, von Massock was connected to sadomasochism, a great Austro-Hungarian thinker and writer, developed a lot of theories about masochism and sexual perversion. So Marianne Faithful, as written in her, I briefly knew her, and written in her autobiography about growing up in this commune, I'm not even sure that she knew the extent of the condition that she had as a child. I mean, she probably did, because she later had mental health issues, and she called it sex and Schopenhauer. So again, this commune, as the Mont Verita commune, they were developing ideas of free love. There was drug taking. There was a caste system where you had the workers doing all the work, and then you had these elites, swapping all these ideas. And of course, Schopenhauer was a major German philosopher and a big influence on Crowley, because effectively it's about the world as will, and you can manifest your will to control the world and other people. So Schopenhauer is very important. So these kids, this new hippie generation, are already being spoon-fed a lot of these, as I was. I this is the kind of partly the world I grew up in the 60s. Free love. You studying philosophy. You studying literature, and so sex and Schopenhauer pretty much sums up her time there. And of course, then subsequently, she became Mick Jagger's girlfriend, and Mick Jagger, who I know a lot about. I know his family, and Mick Jagger was at LSE, very brilliant man. He was funded to go to LSE by the Rockefeller Foundation. So he already was kind of put into a program where he was part of the movement towards transgender, along with David Bowie. So they had the thing about them having a brief affair, and they're both, of course, promoting in their own ways the concept of the dandy, which is very important, because dandy became a development, another program that developed from someone, who I talked about earlier, Bulwer Lytton, who was, and Byron. Of course, these were great heroes or anti-heroes, romantic poets, artists, musicians, anarchists, supposedly tearing down the establishment order, but of course the reverse is happening, is that they're reinforcing doctrines that one of the many doctrines that the establishment can then, or the Illuminati, or the Matrix, whatever you want to call it, the cabal, can use for other purposes to program youth. So again, the drug taking. Also at this time, I did a lot of research into the Stones, and again, that's an incredible web, as is the Beatles, with the conspiracy theories that go on. Brian Jones, of course, you know, the real founder of the Rolling Stones, was webbed up with Anita Pallenberg, another very beautiful aristocrat, you know, wayward aristocrat from the Austro-Hungarian Bohemian aristocracy. So I just thought it was funny that both Jagger and Brian Jones were kind of webbed up, or I won't say controlled, but you know, it was Marianne Faithfull that gave Jagger a book by a Russian thinker, anarchist, occultist called, I think, Mikhail Bulgakov, and Jagger was a very learned man and a very highly educated man, and of course he then started adopting some of the personas of Russian mysticism. He also was, I don't think he was naturally drawn to Crowley magic or theme origins, but then of course he was put into agendas that I'll talk about in a minute in the 60s that were very much involved with Crowley and Kenneth Anger and Sympathy for the Devil. You know, that great album was all dedicated to Crowley. So Anita Pallenberg and Marianne Faithfull are kind of, not that I would say that they were sex kittens, but you know, it's a bit of a stretch to say that they were like honey traps. But you know, I kind of have seen a lot of this before, and it does look a bit that way to me, and it looks a bit that way also that Frieda von Richthofen was to a certain extent a honey trap for D.H. Lawrence, because Lawrence needed an awful lot of sex, and also he didn't really mind who he had sex with, or who she had sex with, but he was involved in a world of sex addicts, as all those people at the Zennor Commune and the Mont Verita Commune, and in the communes during the 60s, when I was living in communes in Germany, so the other thing that, just going on to this, is that both the Beatles and the Stones at that time, I really was interested in counterculture. They were both managed by a guy called Andrew Loog Oldham. I think Andrew Oldham is how he was known, and of course he had connections to Brian Epstein, and it turns out the Beatles and the Stones were both managed by Andrew Loog Oldham. Andrew Loog Oldham's father was in the American military of German descent, and he was actually shot down in a B-17 bomber in the Second World War, and that was Andrew Loog. So Loog Oldham was managing both the Stones and the Beatles, and there was this, again, a Hegelian dialectic in the sense that, are you for the Stones or are you for the Beatles? And when I was growing up, it was like, are you a mod or are you a rocker? Do you like the Stones or do you like the Beatles? So constantly you're thinking, well, you've got to align yourself to one of these two camps. And again, it's the perfect Hegelian dialectic, because both of these fans attaching themselves to these prophets or these messiahs all end up in the same direction. And of course, when Brian Jones was suspiciously died, now I've got a friend of mine who made a film about that, and he of course died at 27, and you know, the 27 Club, I think everyone knows a bit about that. But then they decided at that time that the Beatles and the Stones should move into the transcendental world. So from being a rock and roll band, in you know, rhythm and blues band, the Beatles, the Stones, and the Beatles were also the Liverpool beat scene. They were both projected into, like, now you've got to go to visit the Maharishi yogi. You know, you're getting into transcendental meditation. You know, but they both promoted this agenda for a while. So they were both going to see the Maharishis. So was, you know, other people who I'm very interested in, including Donovan, who is going to be a part of my next book and my next film. At that time, was also, you know, dragged into this agenda, and it suddenly just didn't happen. You know, and the fact that he ran both these bands was very interesting. So again, these communes in the 60s, you know, it really spread like wildfire through California. And this is a guy, this is Kenneth Anger. You switched from me in a blue shirt to him in a blue shirt, and I suddenly thought, is that me or him? Kenneth Anger, very interesting man. He, again, was a massive follower of Crowley's Thelema religion, as a lot of these people were. And he, as a child, he had gone to Crowley's Thelema, Abbey of Thelema in Sicily, where he'd performed a lot of sex rituals and black magic rituals. And the thing about Crowley is that even in terms of hardcore Satanists, like the guys that followed, with the people in California that took this to an extreme, Crowley was still way beyond them when it comes to in terms of depravity. So he really took things to the extreme, and even many of those Satanists found him, just too much. But Kenneth Anger became a film director. He did some very brilliant films. One of his films was Lucifer Rising, and as you can see, he like many of these people, openly displayed the fact that the belief system was that Lucifer was the true God, not Jehovah, and that when all the chaos magic and all these agendas all go belly up, and when all the wars, all the chaos that's been spread by certainly in the West, by the likes of NATO and the CIA and MI6 and the depopulation agenda, then Lucifer is going to be the answer, and he's going to come and save the world. So it kind of relates a bit to the Antichrist, and also to the Project Bluebeam theories. So Kenneth Anger was making these films, and one of his films was called Lucifer Rising, and he wanted Mick Jagger to be in this film. I think Mick wisely decided he didn't want to be in this film, but he got Mick's brother Chris involved, and I know Chris, and Chris did some soundtrack for my Zennor film, and I'm good friends with him. And but anyway, Marianne Faithfull was involved, because Marianne Faithfull was well versed in occultism from growing up in this commune at Braziers Park that was run by her father, who was high up in MI6, who debriefed Himmler. So you can see all these connections between espionage, between occultism and magic, and between what we now call the counterculture, which also prior to that was philosophical belief systems. So my interest in all these three things is how I can make these connections that maybe people thinking, well, that's a bit of a stretch, but when you look at the synchronicity of all of it and join up the dots, you can see how this web can be deconstructed. So Kenneth Anger went to Egypt to research for Lucifer Rising, and a lot of the belief systems from Luciferianism and Satanism go back to Egyptian mythology. So he went to Egypt with Marianne Faithfull, made Lucifer Rising. The satanic, the Stones LP, originally was called On His Satanic Majesty's Service. So at this time, Luciferianism in the 60s and Satanism became almost like a lifestyle choice, and it became a popular, quite a trendy thing to be involved with. Again, people didn't know, how this could go badly wrong. So Kenneth Anger made this film, and basically it's a celebration of Crowley's Thelema religion. Now, Kenneth Anger, his films are very interesting, and they're very underground films, but he did develop a cult following. And one of the characters he used in his film, one of the actresses he used was Jack Parsons' widow. Jack Parsons, as we chatted about the other day, ran JPL, which was Jack Parsons' laboratory, and which then transmorphed into NASA. And Jack Parsons and Ron Hubbard, Parsons was secretly, promoting, an agent for Crowley's Thelema religion, because Crowley had formed another commune, another secret society in Pasadena in Southern California, and that's where Jack Parsons was kind of indoctrinated or put into this program. And of course then Parsons was involved with summoning entities, interdimensional entities. He got involved with the whole space thing, and the Dark Side of the Moon, the album by the Pink Floyd. Again, the Dark Side of the Moon is a crater on the moon that is named after Jack Parsons. So he's got his own crater on the moon. And so again, we're into counterculture programming through music, which again also relates to like trance, these beats that are, the rhythms, the heavy metal. I mean, this is endless. So Jack Parsons' wife who was a witch and a sculptor, was then used in Kenneth Anger's films, which were basically, celebrations of Luciferianism and Crowleyism. So when Parsons was told by Ron Hubbard that he would die in an explosion, well, sure enough, he did. They had the Babylon working, which was to do with Crowley's own Babylon rituals, which we can't really go into details on that now, but that was connected to the Montauk experiment and the Philadelphia experiment. And of course, when that working went wrong, sure enough, Jack Parsons, his lab exploded, and he was clearly taken out. But again, he met a bad end as a result of dabbling in these rituals. So yeah, the Kenneth Anger, he created the Church of Satan, was very heavily influenced by the counterculture movement, and a lot of other people who were bringing these fake gurus. Southern California at that time, it was a hotbed where all these philosophies that developed into communes. Of course, it all went terribly wrong because other people were setting up communes. It spread like wildfire. So you get, the Charlie Manson commune, and then you get I think was it Son of Sam. You get communes where you're then into the UFO alien agendas, where an alien spaceship is going to come and save a certain amount of people and take them away there. And then, of course, you get, I think it was the Son of Sam one, when all these people had to commit mass suicide to ascend into the next dimension. So immediately you're into a massive mind control program. And I dare say a lot of these agendas were run by the CIA anyway, including Charlie Manson, which is one big satanic ritual. And, of course, Polanski, brilliant filmmaker, at that time in that part of California. There was a lot of people involved with these groups, including Jack Nicholson and Shirley MacLaine and Warren Beatty, and apart from Polanski, but it was Polanski that was made the scapegoat for the girl, the underage sex that was going on, and of course the killing of Sharon Tate, a satanic ritual, Rosemary's Baby, all part of this agenda. 2001, Stanley Kubrick's film, funded, and the Black Monolith, there's various argues about what that Black Monolith is. So at that time in Southern California, very interesting, the psychedelic counterculture was more or less developed from the theories of Timothy Leary, who was also put in place or funded by Huxley, and the British Fabians, more or less at that time, were the ideological arm behind the CIA, because I don't think the CIA had, the American version, had the education or was steeped into these esoteric belief systems that these guys, the Fabian intellectuals, were highly educated, and of course, it's in their DNA. So that they were running a lot of this counterculture, and of course the whole psychedelic movement again goes back to what happened with Robert Graves when he wrote Battle for the Mind, which Dr. Cameron then sold to Huxley and the CIA, and this became the template for using magic mushrooms and hallucinogenics. And it was at 1970 when I quit my military school and then started living on a commune. I went to the Isle of Wight Pop Festival. And then I had my own experience of this, because the festival was all of the finest musicians at that time, probably the best pop festival ever, like with Hendrix's last gig, and everyone you want to mention, Leonard Cohen, Joni Mitchell, the Doors. I was given my first LSD tab by some random girl who was passing around in the crowd, and of course then I had a really bad trip. But in retrospect, you're thinking, well, that's very generous of this beautiful young hippie to go spreading LSD tabs. And then you realise that they were probably sent out, because Timothy Leary flooded the universities in California with LSD, and Timothy Leary again was involved with the CIA. I know people that know Timothy Leary, and they say, oh no, he was just a hippie. But Timothy Leary was self-confessed promoting the work of Aleister Crowley, so they were all steeped in Crowley's Thelema religion. At that time, there was other people like Ken Kesey, who also had a connection with St Ives, which I'm going to write about in my next book. The whole thing, like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I mean, all these Hollywood films, it's all predictive programming, it's all rolling out the agenda. So the agenda one was then that madness is sanity, and this goes back to Otto Gross, where the concept is that bourgeois Western civilization is corrupt to such a point, which, we can agree with that, but the only solution is madness. So the promotion of schizophrenia through people like R.D. Laing, who wrote The Divided Self, and R.D. Laing was another product of the Tavistock Institute, and another person who became a bit of a guru for psychiatrists in the 60s, who promoted the fact that we have divided selves. So again, the whole mental illness agenda is one that is promoted to spread this nihilism. And of course the counterculture was ideal for that. I mean, I could go on and on and on, but just one other example is Laurel Canyon, which I'm particularly interested in the sense that I'm a big fan of, people like Joni Mitchell, Crosby, Stills and Nash, all those. Laurel Canyon is pretty much a CIA hangout, and a lot of these people were from military families. And another one, briefly I'll mention, is the Grateful Dead. So the Summer of Love in 1967 was effectively a manifestation of Brave New World, where people are given what's called bread and circuses, or they're given entertainment, they're given happy drugs, and they're sucked in, and then all their energy, you can program all the energy, you can harvest their energy, or they're sent out in the world to promote that particular agenda. And the Grateful Dead is one of the kind of seminal heavy metal rock bands. Was a guy called, I think it was Eric Trist, was working at the Tavistock Institute. He was also involved with the CIA, obviously, because Tavistock was heavily involved with CIA. He was one of his sons was in the Grateful Dead. Another guy called Robert Hunter, his father was also in the CIA. So the Grateful Dead again became, Grateful Dead. I mean, look at the terminology, look at the programming, the sympathy for the devil. Again, it's all promoting a Luciferian agenda. I could go on and on about that. It's very fascinating, but I'll kind of draw it up to a conclusion. I know this is something you're kind of interested in, Miles, in that you had some.
The Temple of Set.
Yeah, the Church of Satan was set up by Kenneth Anger.
Reference the Aquino interviews.
Anton LaVey set up the church. Anton LaVey was another, as far as I can see, a complete comment, but a completely addicted to Crowley's belief systems in sex magic. And the reason it's called sex magic with a K is that K is the 11th letter in the alphabet, and of course Aleister Crowley's number is 11. 11 is the number of abracadabra. 11 is one of Crowley's ritual formulas, like Twin Towers. So you can go deep down these rabbit holes. But the Church of Satan was set up by Anton LaVey, and he used to wear like devil's horn. So now you're into the area when it's becoming popular entertainment. So
got a couple of jets flying over.
Yeah.
Just when you mentioned that,
it's like Crowley's, incredibly complicated Enochian combination of Enochian belief systems, along with Egyptian belief systems that these people were well versed in, is being infanticized, and spread to the masses as some kind of lifestyle choice, in the sense that you can wear plastic horns. And Anton LaVey, I think, was just another con man who then capitalized on it. And I even looked the other day, I found some interesting thing that Jane Mansfield was involved in the occult and the Church of Satan, and Jane Mansfield at that time.
So her death was a ritual.
Yes,
her
her death was very much a ritual. Jane Mansfield was pretty much a beautiful American homely type who was transported into like the sex goddess. Given the look, another version of Marilyn Monroe, and of course we all know about Marilyn Monroe and the Kennedys. Again, we're looking at honey trap, really. So Jane Mansfield was involved with Anton LaVey's Church of Satan, and then of course they fell out. I think he wanted to manipulate Jane Mansfield. She got cold feet, and then he put a curse on her, and I think her boyfriend was killed in a car crash. She had a lot of unfortunate. She just wanted out of the whole thing. She wanted to get out of the program, and I think you can't get out of the program once you're in it. And I think ultimately her death was she was decapitated, again, which is a common Illuminati or Freemasonry death. This also happened to Jackson Pollock, who was the great abstract painter who was run by Peggy Guggenheim, and the CIA, well, I won't go into too much into this, but the CIA controlled the abstract expressionist art movement. So Jackson Pollock's style of painting was like anti-art, and again this goes back to Berlin Dadaism, and it goes back to the philosophies at Montverita, where you need to like create art that is ugly, and you need to create music that is atonal. So rather than you moving on from Beethoven's Pastoral Symphony into the likes of Strindberg and Shostakovich, atonal music, and then of course freeform jazz is another form. It's like instant headache as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, so she died in a ritual killing. And then the Church of Satan, I think, was the guy that then was in the Church of Satan was Michael Aquino, who was also involved with the American military intelligence in some capacity. But again, he was another massive follower of Crowley. He was absolutely obsessed with Crowley's Thelema, along with like Anton LaVey, Ron Hubbard, Scientology, Jack Parsons. They were all pretty much promoting the Crowley's Thelema religion. So when Crowley had this idea in 1900, and between 1900 and 1920, that his religion would become the new religion in Russia, that failed because Russian Orthodoxy proved to be a bit too strong for that. But ultimately, it was a takedown of Christianity to be replaced by Lucifer. But certainly, he was successful in the West, and now, of course, that America as Babylon, which is going to fall, the Aeon of Horus. Now, Michael Aquino also left, all these occult groups normally end up with people leaving because they've all got massive egos and they're all doing black magic rituals on each other, and they're all basically going nuts. He left Anton LaVey's Satan Church to form the Church of Set, and the Church of Set was again, it followed the belief system about Crowley's, which I talked about earlier, the Aeon. So there was the Aeon of Horus, is the current Aeon, and then there's the Aeon of Isis and the Aeon of Osiris, again back to 2,000 year cycle. So Aquino even developed this further, and he then, such was his ego, that went on to believe that there was a sub-Aeon in this, and one of these sub-Aeons was the Aeon between 1966 and 1975, when he was involved in the Church of Satan. And this was the Aeon where where Jews and Christians etc. are in. And then he created his own Aeon between 1975, which is when he left the Church of Satan and formed what he called the Church of Set. And the Church of Set was going to be the Aeon of Thelema. So Thelema is Crowley's religion. So you can see how this has all been infiltrated by these beliefs, but it's also been I can't say that word, ridiculed, made popular. In a way, this magic has been perverted. Now, you had some experience, didn't you, Mars, with the Church of Set?
Yes, it involved the death of Max Spears, and when I outed that, it was a case of wanting to get rid of me. And the guy who gave you that initial message suffered 3 brain hemorrhages, and eventually they killed him. And that was all very messy. And even Simon Parks, there were a number of poisonings, the same sort of stuff that was used to take out Max was used on me in an aeroplane in Dublin. Apart from that, everything's fine.
Well,
so that's very interesting. And we'll be doing another pause on this until next time. Any final little things about the major news, of course, about the major news about your book?
Yes,
going paperback is a big deal.
Yes, quite positive news on that front, because I had 4 legal challenges against me from absolute nincompoops as far as I'm concerned.
You don't want to say anything to upset them now.
We seem to have struck a deal. I think I did reply to some of them saying, look, as far as I'm concerned, you're lucky that I've even included your work in my book, even if I haven't credited a couple of photographs. So I paid a fine of 60 quid, which was, I suppose, a legal technicality, but they all reduced it when I argued my corner. And now they're all saying to me, well, when you go to paperback, make sure that you include acknowledgements that we have given you permission to use these photographs. These photographs are people I knew anyway, and I knew their families. So the fact that I've gone to some...
Well, we don't want to have another monkey lawsuit.
I've gone to some third party...
where the monkey took the fake picture.
Exactly.
Or something.
So anyway, it's all good. It's all been resolved amicably, and it now seems that I'm free of this kind of negative energy that could potentially stop me from... Because I don't make any money from these books, and I don't make any money from my research. You know, I'm just obsessed with it, and I'm fascinated by it. And
well, I have to say, so far with the recordings that we've done, people are really appreciating the ability to what we're doing here in terms of joining the dots. I think this is really very important work.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
So with that, exciting episode. Until next time, on Basis 137 with Bob Osborne.